What is the most out-of-touch thing an older person has told you? My dad visited me in the restaurant I was working in at the moment during peak hours and said, "Just tell your boss you're taking your break now and sit with me." Yeah, that's not how it works. My dad has come to visit me, uninvited, at every job I've ever had. From gas station cashier to administrative assistant. When I would have to interrupt his conversation to do my job, he would say with an annoyed tone, "Okay, I see you're busy." Yes. That's what we do at work, Dad. Same with my mom. Will text me and then send question marks over and over. I'm at work. Laboring. We really aren't just on our phones all day. Parents, this younger generation is always on their phone. Parents when their kid doesn't reply to a text because they're busy working. Life must have been easier a few decades ago. Like really, I can't understand how it was 50 years ago, being able to start a family on entry-level jobs not requiring degrees and years of experience, being able to just do stuff like tell your boss you're taking a break now. It seems so foreign to me that I just don't get it. It's right up there with concepts like pensions, and having employers be loyal to employees, and that loyalty being reciprocated. I've never experienced anything like it, and have zero hope of ever seeing such a weird thing in my lifetime. Never in the history of anyone working in restaurants has a server been able to tell their boss they're taking a break when they feel like it during peak service. To be fair, 1950, 1976, 1992, doesn't matter, it's just not how that industry works or has ever worked. I told my boss I wasn't drinking water and was scared to get up to use the bathroom because one of our directors called me twice in like a 2-month span when I went to pee and got mad about it. I spent the majority of my time at my last job eating lunch at my desk because my supervisor wasn't helping with my workload as they said they would, and then when I brought it up they denied it. I told my SR director I didn't feel supported and that I was still fielding questions about my old role. They eliminated my team, and she denied it. I said okay, and then I quit an hour later. They also apparently don't believe in people getting 15-minute breaks. I graduated from law school with a focus on labor and employment law. I am aware of what my rights are. This is still the law in most states as far as I am aware. It's insane that older folks were able to have this but also don't understand how much it is being taken away from younger people, regardless of legality. Denial of breaks is a massive red flag. Indicates a totally corrupt and abusive workplace. Glad you quit. Thanks. I'm still pretty salty about it, honestly. It's hard to explain it to other people in terms of how bad it was. I know many people who quit for similar reasons, and I know people who are still there who absolutely hate the department I worked in because of how poorly they treated staff internally and externally. I did not want to get to last straw over bathroom breaks, but as soon as I was told I was relied on and was getting support, I was like, nope, I'm getting lectured for taking 5 minutes to go to the bathroom. This is over. Scary, but it is what it is. Had he raised me and my siblings so he doesn't see why it's so difficult for us. He was an every other weekend dad for me, and my siblings have lived in a different state from him since elementary school. OMG, my dad was the same way. I recently had a conversation with him where he said I was a very active parent, I came home to you every day. But all he did was work. He didn't cook, clean, help us with homework, make me feel better when sad, help me with bullies, do my hair, guide me to handle relationships or problems, help me develop hobbies or character. He only paid bills. If he wasn't screaming at us for not cleaning, he was not interacting with us. I truly don't think my dad knows any of us. He still calls us by the wrong names. My stepmother and bio mother raised us. But he is convinced he was an active parent because he came home at night. A lot of parents seem to equate keeping a child alive as the same as parenting and raising them. That's my parents. They'd no sooner see me homeless and dying than give me a penny to help. Considering they're living in a house my grandparents gifted them, that's worth over $1 million, that's paid off and is technically 3 families? The same house that only my mom and dad live in, with 2 empty living spaces they could rent out but don't. I've owned my house for 14 years but I suck because I can't afford my $2,200 payment. My mom was like that until I ended up nearly dead from overworking and not eating. I never understood that. Why do our parents think they raised Superwoman and Superman? Anything my dad says about money. His mom was a widow and remarried an eventually wealthy man, who helped my dad bankroll his own business, which my dad turned into a considerable net worth. He thinks everyone has access to startup capital because it happened to him. He thinks everyone should be at his level financially. He thinks everyone pays cash for everything. He is so out of touch with reality because it stopped affecting him for so long and he just doesn't understand why everyone doesn't do what he did. If he thinks everyone should do what he did, doesn't that mean fathers should bankroll their kids' businesses? It kinda seems like his own advice is saying that he should be forking over the cash for you to get ahead in life. Yeah, he always finds a reason for that not to be the case. And I've been fortunate in life, I've made a decent living, but the chance of achieving similar success to him, financially speaking, is so limited anymore. One of the key components of selling the business was that with 2020 being the last year we owned it, he felt that since he didn't understand how to adjust to the market, no one should be given the opportunity. So he sold, pocketed huge amounts of money and acts like that's just the normal course of life. He seems to frequently forget how he got started. My mother said to me just a few days ago that a down payment for a house isn't that hard to save up for. I told her I barely have $5,000 saved up so far. She insisted that that is more than enough. I had to stress that 20% down has been the norm in our area since the 2008 crash. She hasn't bought property since the 90s. My mom argued with me on percentage rates until I showed her 3 different mortgage rate calculators showing that because houses in the PNW are going for $600K plus that our current mortgage would almost triple if me move. My MIL argued rates went up to 18% at one point when we bought a house, stop complaining. Referring to the house that cost them $60K in the 80s that is now selling for $500K. My parents bought around that time, and coincidentally they're huge proponents of putting as much money towards the mortgage as possible to pay it off quickly. They seem to think all it takes is living frugally for a couple years. That would be quite feasible and great advice when house prices were relatively cheap and interest rates were high, but relatively low interest rates and insane house prices make it a whole different thing. It's not something that's feasible to just power through quickly. This was in 1992. I had just turned 11. My parents always took my sister and me to the polling place with them when they'd vote in elections, and that's what we were doing that morning. My dad had stopped to vote on the way to drop my sister and me off at school. As we're leaving the polling place, for some reason, I can't remember the details on how this happened, my dad ends up getting into a conversation with an older man near the exit. Somehow it came up that he had brought us to the polls so that we would know about voting when we were old enough, and was about to drop us off at school. This old man said, "But they're both girls. They don't need to vote, and shouldn't that one be done with school now?" He meant me. My dad was basically like, "Excuse me, what?" And this dude informed him that girls only went to school until the 6th grade. Dad handled it fine. He was just like, "None of that has been the case for a long time. I've got to take my daughters to school now. Have a nice day," and sort of ushered us out. Out of all the out-of-touch things said to me by older people over the years, mostly just the usual walk-in, hand them your resume, and don't walk out until the manager gives you a job kind of thing, but nothing compared to the man in the polling place who thought I should be done in school and that it was frivolous to teach me about voting due to my sex. I remember that old man every time I vote, and I've never missed an election. Edit pertaining to common replies. Yes, could have been dementia. I honestly have no way of knowing that, but it's a possibility. Dude was likely in his 70s if I had to guess. Yes, very backwards for the 90s. The place I grew up is very rural. It's decades behind lots of places tbh. No, he wasn't Middle Eastern, but the dad correcting him is. My grandma was born in 1917 and my lord was she vocal about women voting. You would think a woman going in to vote was required to beat up a baby to do so. Anyway, she did realize how dumb that position was and changed on that about 15 years before she passed, though she never voted herself. What was her reasoning exactly? I mean, in her time growing up, women kept the home and didn't go out and work a job, plus the right for women to vote was a newish right. She also lived through and worked through the Depression with a family and knew hard times. Like she was rabid against a certain political party that caused the Depression, as such that is likely what caused the change as far as voting goes, anything to keep that party out of power. Just walk in and hand them a resume, they will hire you on the spot. If that doesn't work, offer to work for free to get your foot in the door. I did this recently. I had a wild hair up my ass and thought, why not, I've seen you hiring. Walked in with a resume and a generic application. Why these are need with a resume is beyond me. Waited about 45 minutes. Saw the hiring manager. First 5 minutes is about my experience. Next 30 where people don't want to work, it's so hard to hire, I'm so stressed. Like an idiot, I agreed with him. End of the interview, I told I have the job. Great. He will contact you tomorrow to complete paperwork. 3 days go by, I hear nothing. I call, he's not in. I leave a message. 3 weeks go by. I have gone back in person, called, nothing. Week 4. Another hair up my ass. I go back in and he was there. He's sheepish. Oops, I didn't get that to hour. What messages, etc. I told him he is the reason nobody wants to work. I was ready to start ASAP. They are still hiring. Fuck yeah for telling him what's up though. This internet stranger is proud of you. I had a singer, songwriter, guitar player tap me as his drummer and years ago. He said how hard it was to get a dedicated drummer who wanted to actually play. This blew my mind. Until after several weeks of a message coming in, I've got a show in an hour at XX place, and me telling him that, dude, I need more notice than that. I'm not even in the same city right now and I have other responsibilities too. He never got better, lol. I just have up at that point. I wonder why he can't keep a drummer. This place in on a main road. A major chain. I considered calling HR or corporate RO, tell them they have a shit manager. Then I realized I was wasting my time. It was cathartic to tell him he was the problem, not me. If he would have asked, I would have done a 2-hour, free, training. He screwed himself. Sounds about right. You really gotta stay on a potential employer's ass these days or they'll forget to push your paperwork through. Pretty much every job I've ever gotten was my submitting an application, then following up daily until I got my interview, then keeping up the pressure until the hiring process is done. That should not be the responsibility of the potential employee. Young people have no pride left. Why do they think it's okay to still live with their parents at 20? The average age to move out of a parent's home in the UK is 35. Because there's a rental crisis and a housing crisis, especially in non-English countries, partially because the retired English keep buying second homes in Wales, Scotland and NI. Wages have barely increased, but rent and mortgages have increased extreme amounts, and this is because of their generation. Why older people don't understand this concept is beyond me. I once had a similar convo with my dad. I told him $1 when he was young was worth way more than it is now. I told him inflation is a thing. And he just said no, that's not it, and proceeded to not provide any counter-argument and instead just said people are lazy. LOL. What? Has your dad ever purchased anything recently? Like food? One problem is that a lot of old people are in what I call maintenance mode. They already own everything they want, and even stuff they don't want anymore, often eat less and go out less. That means they make fewer purchases so it doesn't impact their budget as much and it's not as noticeable. They don't understand that 20% increase when feeding a family is bigger than for a single person or a couple. My mom, who hasn't worked outside the home in 40 years, complaining about the homeless beggar outside Walmart where there was a big banner saying they're hiring. Why can't they just go in and get a job? I had to explain that when I was looking for a job, I had a home, reliable transportation, good work history, good references, an education, I had clean and professional clothing, the ability to keep myself hygienic, an ID, a phone and computer I can reliably be contacted at, I come from an upper middle class family, and the ability to take care of and treat my mental health, and even with all that, I sometimes wouldn't even get called in for an interview at an entry-level job. Or if I was lucky enough to get an interview, I wouldn't necessarily get a call back to even tell me I didn't get the job. Like, I know Walmart isn't looking for much, but the job market is still competitive. Do you really think Walmart is going to hire someone who doesn't have basic resources available to even ensure they can show up to a job? I couldn't believe how out of touch she was and how much she takes for granted to believe you can just stroll in anywhere and be handed a job without anything to your name. Plus, I believe in most cases you are required to have an address in order to get hired at most places. Walmart, especially. Seeing as I worked there for 6 years and never broke out of poverty levels even at full time, though, a homeless person would only benefit so much from a job like that. People don't realize you have to have basic resources just to better yourself, and those resources are not available for every person. My dad told me if I voted for Obama I was a traitor to my country, and he said it with literal tears and rage in his eyes. I didn't say a word to him in response, I just shook my head sadly and left. This just makes me sad more than anything. It makes me sad that there are genuinely people out there who are so brainwashed and full of hate for others that they will get visibly and emotionally distressed over something like this. Like he was well within his rights to have different opinions, but I can't even fathom getting that upset over it. Yeah, we pretty much stopped speaking after that. Figured I didn't have much to say to him. He beat the shit out of me until I was 17 years old, had enough, hit him back and then moved out the house the very next day. I think he was still trying to control me at that point, but by then I was 30 and didn't give a fuck. We reconciled briefly after my first son was born because goddamn that's his grandchild, but then Trump happened a few years later, he went fully in on that and then said some really ugly horrendous things about my wife, and I didn't see or talk to him again until he was on his deathbed with COVID. I have regrets, but our differences were not reconcilable ones and we both understood that. Honestly, it sounds like a second chance was one more than he deserved. Please like and subscribe for more daily content.